Welcome to Fresh Talk.
Today, we're really getting into a case that it sticks with you. One of America's most infamous true crime stories. The Menendez Brothers.
It's decades later, and people are still talking, still debating. It really has that kind of enduring fascination.
Absolutely. The core figures, Erik and Lyle Menendez, young men, seemingly had it all, and then in 1989, this incredibly shocking act.
The murder of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez. Wealthy, powerful figures killed in their own Beverly Hills mansion. Just unthinkable.
Right. It just shattered that whole image. And that leaves us with the big questions we really want to explore in this deep dive. Why? Why did they do it?
And the question that keeps coming up now, could they ever actually get out? Could they walk free?
It's got so many layers, hasn't it? The family dynamics, the motive. Was it greed? Was it something else? And, the whole justice aspect.
Exactly. It really pushes you to think about intent, about consequence, and maybe how our understanding of those things changes over time.
So to really get a handle on this, we need to look at that family image first, what everyone thought they saw.
Yeah, the public perception. Because it was, the American dream, right? On steroids, almost.
Jose Menendez, huge entertainment executive, came here, built a fortune, a really powerful, driven guy by all accounts.
Yeah, an immigrant success story.
And Kitty Menendez, the mother, often described as a socialite, homemaker, but maybe someone whose life was also kind of caught up in the family pressures beneath the surface.
Definitely seems that way from some sources. And then the boys, Erik and Lyle. You see pictures, they're at Princeton, they're talented tennis players.
Living this incredibly privileged life, yeah. But you also hear about intense pressure, especially from their father. Very strict.
And that's the key, isn't it? That stark contrast, this glittering public image versus, what might have been going on inside.
Was it just pressure to succeed? Or was it, like you said, something darker?
Well, the sources suggest this intense need to maintain the facade, almost like a performance, even within the family. Not just high expectations, but maybe hiding certain vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
That difference between the public success story and the potential for these hidden, maybe really destructive dynamics, that's absolutely crucial to understanding what happened next. It sets the stage.
Because that carefully built image didn't just crack, it exploded. August 20th, 1989.
The night everything changed.
The brothers shot Jose and Kitty. Shotguns. It was brutal.
Horrifying details.
But then, the aftermath. There's the part that immediately grabbed headlines and honestly still shocks people.
The spending spree.
Right. Almost immediately they start buying things. Expensive cars, Rolexes, clothes, just living it up.
It seemed incredibly callous. And, for the prosecution, that was Exhibit A.
Totally. How could you do that if you weren't just greedy monsters who wanted the money?
That certainly became the dominant narrative very quickly. It framed everything. But, looking back, some perspectives suggest maybe it wasn't just greed.
How so?
Well, some psychological viewpoints might interpret that kind of extreme behavior, that spending, as maybe a sign of profound shock, disassociation, or even this weird, twisted attempt to feel in control after something so catastrophic.
Huh. That's a different lens entirely. Less about money, more about their mental state, maybe.
Potentially. It definitely adds another layer of complexity to just reading it as pure, simple greed. It raised more questions, even then.
Which leads us straight into the heart of the whole conflict, the battle over motive. The trials basically presented two completely opposite reasons for the murders.
Yeah, two narratives that just couldn't coexist, really, and they split the country.
Okay, so narrative one, the prosecution. What was their core argument?
Straight up financial gain. Cold-blooded murder. They argued Erik and Lyle wanted their parents' inheritance, that vast fortune, and they killed to get it. Simple as that. Greed.
Okay. Clear motive. But then, the defense. They told radically different story.
Radically different. They argued years of horrific abuse. Physical, emotional, and most explosively, sexual abuse, allegedly at the hands of both parents, but particularly Jose.
Wow. And so their argument was
that the murders weren't driven by greed at all. They were an act of desperation, fear, self-preservation almost. A preemptive strike against parents they believed would eventually kill them.
So you have these two incredibly powerful, mutually exclusive narratives, greed versus survival. How did the public even begin to process that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think what the sources really highlight is how this case tapped into people's existing beliefs.
What do you mean?
Well, if you deeply believed in that shiny image of the successful family, maybe the spoiled rich kid's narrative just made more sense. It fit a certain worldview.
Okay, I see that.
But at the same time, society was starting to talk more openly about hidden abuse, about trauma. So for people attuned to that, the defense's story, however shocking, resonated. It felt possible, maybe even plausible.
So the case became a kind of Rorschach test.
Yeah.
Reflecting what people were ready to believe about privilege and pain and how they mix.
Exactly. It was a mirror. And that clash, that realization that both narratives could feel true depending on your perspective, that's why it's still so debated. There wasn't, and maybe still isn't, an easy answer.
And the public definitely had a front row seat. These trials were huge media events.
Oh, massive. Televised. This was early 90s court TV era. It was everywhere. It really felt like the trial of the century, or one of them anyway.
Competing with another huge case around that time, too.
Right. The O.J. Simpson trial followed not long after, but Menendez really kicked off that intense televised trial phenomenon for many.
And that first trial, it ended in a hung jury, right?
Yeah, 2 separate juries for each brother, actually, and both deadlocked. They couldn't reach a unanimous verdict.
Which really says something about how divided people were, even the ones hearing all the evidence.
Absolutely. It mirrored that public split perfectly, but then came the retrial.
And that one had a very different outcome.
1 judge, 1 jury this time. And the outcome was conviction, first-degree murder for both,
And the sentence?
life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Which is definitive. That means legally, they're intended to stay in prison for the rest of their lives. No chance of getting out through the standard parole process.
Exactly. It's a sentence that signifies the system saw their crime as premeditated, severe, and offered no path to release based on, good behavior or rehabilitation down the line. Legally, the book was closed.
So the verdict came down, life without parole. What happened to Erik and Lyle then, over the decades in prison?
Well, for a long time, they were actually kept in separate prisons, different facilities across California.
Really? Separated for years?
Yeah, for quite a while. But there was a significant change more recently.
What was that?
In 2018, they were reunited. They're now both housed in the same facility, the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility down near San Diego, receiving their sentences together now.
Huh. After all that time.
Yeah.
And yet something else has been happening outside prison walls, right?
Yeah.
This kind of resurgence of interest, maybe even sympathy.
Definitely. It's quite remarkable. You've seen a wave of new documentaries, true crime series that Netflix won. Monsters got huge attention. Books, too.
Yeah.
And even TikTok clips going viral.
TikTok?
Yeah, short clips, often focusing on the abuse testimony, reaching a whole new generation who didn't live through the original trials.
So what's driving this? Why now?
I think it's partly the power of new media formats. They can reframe the narrative, maybe emphasize aspects that got less attention back then, like the psychological arguments or the context of trauma.
So it's less about brand new evidence and more about a new perspective on the existing story.
Largely, yes. These documentaries and discussions often highlight specific testimonies, maybe bring in modern psychological experts to talk about coercive control or long-term trauma effects in a way that wasn't as common or maybe as understood in the early 90s.
Right.
It allows people, especially younger audiences, to maybe see the defense's case through a different, perhaps more sympathetic lens today.
Which brings us right back to that huge question. Given life without parole sentence, could freedom ever be a real possibility?
That's the crux of the current debate, isn't it?
You hear talk about new evidence or re-examining the evidence of abuse. And there are definitely public campaigns pushing for reconsideration, people advocating for them.
There's a very active movement online and elsewhere calling for a new hearing or some form of clemency.
But legally, how realistic is that? Life without parole sounds pretty final.
Legally, it's an extremely high bar. Life without parole means just that in most cases. The kind of new evidence being discussed often relates more to reinterpretation or emphasis, like we said, rather than, say, DNA proof of innocence or previously unknown witness who changes everything.
So overturning the conviction itself seems unlikely based on what's publicly known.
Generally, legal experts agree it's very unlikely. The avenues are incredibly narrow. Things like clemency from the governor are technically possible, but politically and legally very difficult for cases like this.
So despite the renewed interest and sympathy, the legal reality is pretty stark.
It is. But the ongoing debate itself is significant. It shows how much this case still challenges us and how our societal understanding of things like trauma and abuse has evolved, prompting this desire to look back and ask, did we get it right? Even if the legal path forward is blocked.
It really is one of the most enduringly controversial cases. We've looked at the glittering facade, the darkness underneath, that shocking night.
And those two totally conflicting narratives, greed versus abuse, that just tore public opinion apart.
Right. Were they victims acting out of desperation or just cold-blooded killers? Decades on, we still don't have consensus.
No easy answers, and the new media attention just seems to amplify that fundamental divide.
It really forces you to grapple with tough questions about family, secrets, justice, and how we judge people under the most extreme circumstances.
So as you're thinking about all this, here's something to maybe mull over. This case, maybe more than others, forced the public to stare at two seemingly impossible truths at the same time. How does the passage of time, the way new media like TikTok can reframe old stories, and our maybe more nuanced understanding of trauma today, how does all that make us question the original verdict? But maybe more importantly, how does it challenge our own sense of justice and empathy, especially when the initial story felt so clear-cut to so many back then? What does this constant reevaluation tell us about ourselves?